In this section, we're going to look at this critical concept of crawling and indexing. And this section consists of a couple different parts. The main takeaway, though, is we've looked at individual pages, like what does a search engine result page look like? What are different types of search intent? Answering those kinds of questions. And now we want to dig into how do pages actually end up where they can be displayed in search engine result pages. Can all pages be, or do they have to have some kind of attribute? And we're going to cover that. So we'll answer this question: how do pages show up in search results? Then we'll dig into what is a cached page. So for those pages that actually are part of a search engine index, what can we know about them? We'll take a look at that concept, cache pages. And then we'll answer this critical question, which is, how do we control what do we see on our site? Are there relevant things we can do to either block the crawler or that might be inadvertently blocking the crawler from pages that are important to us? So we're going to say, how do we control the crawler? And we're going to look at this concept called robots.txt. So let's answer this question. How do pages show up in search results? That is, we get search results. Why do some pages show up in those search results and others don't? It's good to start with this concept when discussing this topic of crawling and indexing. Look, the search engine's job is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, the current way that people access the search engine databases is through either typing words or saying words. So what the search engine's trying to do is trying to make information accessible through the words that people use to describe their intent. So if we think about the process by which they do that, we could say that search engines really have these kind of two functions, right? They're out there trying to find the value on web pages, oftentimes in whatever content, whether or not it's images or videos or text. So they're trying to find that information. And then they need to deliver it to people in some way that matches the search intent with the words that have been used. So if we kind of break this into a little bit more proper search engine optimization terminology, we'd say the finding part is called crawling and indexing. Right? Search engines are going out and trying to find content. And then the delivery of it is them ranking it and displaying it in a search engine result page. So let's really focus our efforts here on understanding this crawling and indexing process. So the often used analogy for crawling and indexing is looking at like a subway system or a road map. Okay, and in this we can imagine that in a subway system or a train network, that all of the stations in this network represent pages. Okay, so web pages, and between all of these different pages are links. So the train track themselves would be considered links in this analogy. And so what the search engine does, the way that it crawls sites, the term crawling and spidering are used synonymously for the most part for this discussion, is that they start at some known valuable site, or this is a conceptual way of imagining this. They start at some known valuable site, right? So Wikipedia, for example, and then Wikipedia has all these links to other sites. So the search engine will read all the Wikipedia pages, and wherever it links out to other pages, it'll then go through those links. So it'll crawl through those links to those other pages, read those pages, find any links, crawl to the others, etc. So this is the process of crawling, where the search engines are find all of the valuable pages across the internet and save them somewhere. And what they're doing is they're storing them in an easy to retrieve format. So they want to be able to say that when I search for corgi puppies, that it's going to be able to correctly identify pages that are about corgis, about corgi puppies, and depending upon what search intent I display, rapidly find the pages that meet those criteria. So the way that they store it is they store it in these data storage centers, right? And we would call this the index. So it has crawled pages and then it indexes them in the storage center. The important thing to think about here is that if your pages have not been crawled and have not been indexed by the search engine, then they're not going to show up in the search engine result pages. And this can be one of the major issues facing a site. Why am I not showing up in ranks? Well, the first question is, are my pages even in the index? Are they even able to be displayed regardless of what the quality of the content is on that? So crawling errors and things that are associated with crawling and indexing can be a major problem for a site if you're not appropriately indexed. Let's talk about cached pages and how they relate to indexation, as well as some of the things that we can derive from search operators. So, when a page or site is crawled by a search engine, the page attributes are recorded and indexed. So, here we have an example of a page, and when the search engine crawls this page, it's going to record things like the page title, and it's going to look at the images, maybe follow through different internal external derive from search operators. So when a page or site is crawled by a search engine, the page attributes are recorded and indexed. So here we have an example of a page, and when the search engine crawls this page, it's going to record things like the page title, and it's going to look at the images, maybe follow through different internal external links and H tags, etc. But it's also going to look at a ton of other attributes associated with that page, including things like how fast did it load, some sense of whether or not it has any security certification, are there social buttons, how easy is it to read, text size, etc. This is often said to be 200 or more ranking signals that are collected by the search engine when indexing a page. So all of that is stored in a storage center, and we would call that the index for the search engine. Well, what can we know about the indexed pages that the search engine has about our site or our customer's site? Well, we can get a sense of what pages are in the index for a site by using this search operator. We're going to look at a couple search operators here. The first one is going to be site colon. So if you use site colon with no space and then your website, what you'll get is you'll get all of the results that the search engine has for that site, or at least close to it. It's directional in nature. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to be directional in nature. It should be somewhere close to the number. So here we can see that when we do the Moz.com site and say site colon Moz.com, put that in the search engine, we've now instructed the search engine to just show us pages that it has on the site. And so we can see this number here, 45,900. That would represent how many pages meet this criteria that are in the index. This is not the same as saying how many pages are actually on the Moz.com site. This is just the number of pages that the search engine has in its index. This might be a number that is smaller than the total number of pages, or it might be a number that is bigger than the total number of pages. And both of those would be things that we want to try to understand why that's the case. These pages that it has in the index are referred to as cached pages. So let's look at an example of what a cached page is. We can see any given page for its cached version. So imagine that you have a blog or a page on a website. In this case, it's a Wikipedia page. And that page has been changed. So you update the picture or you update the text on the page. Just because you update the page on your site doesn't mean that the search engine has updated that same page in its index. If it hasn't crawled the site recently, it will not display the information associated with that new updated page. So if we want to see what is the cached version, that is, show me the page that you have in your index versus the one that is maybe live, how do I see that? Well, we can use this example here with the Wikipedia page. So let's go ahead and take this URL for this Wikipedia page, and then we're going to add the search operator cache colon, and then the URL. When I add the search operator cache colon and a URL after it, what that delivers me is this version. So you'll see that there is a little bar across or a little tray across the top of the page now. This says this is Google's cached version of the URL, snapshot of the page as it appeared with the date and time when it was crawled, current page, etc., etc. And then you can see these three items underneath it: full version, text-only version, or view source. So in this case, full version is bolded. That means we are viewing the full version, although we could look at the text-only version or view source. So the important thing to think about with these three options is that when a search engine crawls your page, it does not render it in a browser, at least not on mobile, or with mobile this might be different. However, often with desktop, it is not rendering it in a browser. It's just reading the code. So when we want to actually see what the version of the page that the search engine sees, quote unquote, when it crawls the page, we'd want to look at this. We'd want to look at the view source. Okay, and what this is going to show us is it's going to show us this. This is the code of the page, and it's just showing us how the search engine would view that. So the important thing here, and you'll often hear this in discussions, is that because it's not being loaded in a browser, it may not show things like JavaScript. So if you have JavaScript on your site, the cached version, or what's being recorded by the search engine, may not include things that are enabled by JavaScript. It's important to understand robots.txt when trying to diagnose any crawl issues, and also when using it to control how crawlers see your sites. So let's ask this question. So when a site is indexed by a search engine, is there any way that we can provide instructions for what pages to crawl and what not to crawl? Let's say that we have either portions of the site that don't have a lot of value, or we have the alternative where we have pages that we absolutely want to make sure show up in the index. How can we do that? Well, we can do that with robots.txt. Robots.txt are instructions for a web crawler, because when web crawlers hit a site, the first thing that they're going to go do is read the sitemaps, and they're going to read the robots.txt file. So you can kind of see here in this graphic that if we have this sitemap, as soon as the search engine hits a site, first thing it's going to do is go read the robots.txt. Let's take a look at that. So here is the Moz robots.txt file. You can see in the address bar that it is simply moz.com/robots.txt. If you go to pretty much any website, you can put in that /robots.txt and view their instructions for the crawler. It can be kind of insightful. The syntax for robots.txt is similar across pretty much every file that you're going to see. However, the degree to which people have this filled out may or may not be the same. Let's look at that syntax. So here's how you would fill out the robots.txt. There is this line that says user agent. So the user agent refers to the web crawler. So the user agent would be that crawler. In this case, we're looking at the Googlebot image crawler. Oftentimes you will see user agent and there'll be a star. And the star represents, for this discussion, a wildcard. So it says all user agents, all crawlers follow these instructions, or the following instructions that come after that. So here we say user agent is the first line, and then beneath that is a series of allow and disallow files. So you can see the star there. The star represents, again, a placeholder. And in this case, we'd say do not crawl. So you are not allowed to index anything that is in the slash checkout folder. And so you'll see some robots.txt files are quite prolific. They'll have a lot of things called out, and some will just have nothing called out. So this is a normal syntax for robots.txt files. It'll be a user agent, it'll define that user agent, and then it'll be, here are things I either want you to stay out of or make sure that you crawl. Let's look at the Nike robots.txt. They kind of have an interesting thing. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Nike's robots.txt file, you'll see actually a swoosh, which is kind of cool. But it's good. It's a good example because what we see here is we see quite a few instructions for different user agents. So there at the top, we see user agent star. That means all web crawlers follow these instructions that come right after that. We see a couple of allow files and some disallow files. Then you'll see that there are specific instructions for Googlebot, specific instructions for Googlebot image, and then specific instructions for Baidu Spider, right? So each one of the search engines have their own instructions. And in this case, you can see, for example, the Baidu Spider has disallows applied to all of its different language folders. So all it's doing is saying you're allowed to go through what appears to be the Chinese language. However, all these other languages, just ignore those, don't index them. They're going to be of very little value to you, right? And that makes sense if you have primarily Chinese-speaking populations or searchers, then it's going to be really not worth the effort to go and index all of the site pages that are in different languages or for different audiences. So you can see here that you have a lot of flexibility with robots.txt. However, you do want to make sure that it's configured correctly. So for example, what if you inadvertently block a major portion of your site on robots.txt? Or if you put in a disallow designation in robots.txt that refers to a folder structure where all of your images are held. So you can imagine that there could be some pretty simple errors that take place with robots.txt files, but also a lot of opportunities.